hope everyone is all right today and that you guys have had a really good day. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I am your host. This is the Progressive Soapbox. I hope you guys like the new intro. Blue is my favorite color, so it was no point in having it to be red. But the guy was nice enough to work with me with it, so it's shorter the way I want it. It's awesome. Let's do the news. There is a massive scandal that should be brewing, even though I don't necessarily think it's brewing, and I haven't necessarily seen it covered that much in mainstream media, even though this is far larger than anything at the height of what they're accusing Donald Trump of in regards with the Russian government. This is far worse, even at the worst of hysteria that's associated with it. I'm going to make an argument. And I think the argument is substantiated by the evidence that I'm going to present. With that argument, that it has to be investigated, and I suspect Barr is investigating, which is probably what's freaking the Democratic Party out. It seems that there was collusion that took place in our last election, in the 2016 Trump-Clinton election. And that collusion wasn't between Trump and Russia, as we know, because Mueller investigated that as aggressively as somebody could investigate it for the last 3 years and shown that that collusion did not exist. The collusion that I am talking about took place between the Democratic Party, potentially even the Obama administration. By Democratic Party, let's say the DNC, and potentially even the Obama administration working with the Ukrainian government to intercede into our political affairs. And to some degree, they did. Now, this is the interesting part of this. And in fact, let me start at the beginning. And I'm going to say a submissive Ukrainian government, because that matters. That makes a big difference in regards to this particular argument. Recently, and there's a reason Joe Biden is in the background, the Ukrainian embassy comes out and admits that a DNC contractor was working at the embassy trying to elicit information, trying to get information on the Trump campaign. And not just trying to get information on the Trump campaign, trying to get Poroshenko, the president of the submissive government of the Ukraine, that had just come through a revolution pushed on by the Western governments that separated it from a pro-Western government. Even tried to get Poroshenko to answer questions that would bring light on Manafort. They were doing their best to try to get, they essentially wanted Poroshenko to put out information about Trump and Manafort, or at the very least Manafort, with hopes of pushing forward an investigation in Congress on the subject. Meaning, if they can get the Ukrainian government of Poroshenko to say something about this, then Congress can legitimately hold hearings on this particular issue. That is amazing. That is literal intervention by one of the parties. Now, they've, up to this point, said, oh, that's not, well, we don't know if that's the case. We don't know if that's the case. Well, the Ukrainian embassy has just come out and said it. Now, this gets more interesting even than that. The Ukrainian embassy confirms that the DNC contractor solicited Trump dirt in 2016. They own it. They say a woman was working with them named Chalupa. I'm going to say Chalupa. I'm not going to say she's a woman. I think it's a woman. But a contractor, Alexandra Chalupa, who, based on this story now, this is coming from the Ukrainian embassy, based on their story, and there's another dimension to this that has to be taken into consideration. I'll explain. But first, let me give the Ukrainian embassy what they at the very least own up to. And they were, to some degree, forced to own up to this. Because my question was, why are they owning up to this now? I'll explain why. The Ukrainian embassy says a DNC insider in 2016 solicited dirt on Trump campaign chairman and even tried to enlist the country's president's help. Chalupa was working as an activist, quote-unquote activist, at the Ukrainian embassy. Now, while she was at the embassy working as an activist, she tried to get information and dirt on Manafort. And she tried to get the president of the Ukraine, during some kind of questioning, to bring this issue up in a way that could spur on congressional hearings. You can understand why. During the 2016 campaign you're running, they start congressional hearings with somebody who's one of your closest allies within the context of your campaign, which maybe even include you. So you can understand why the DNC wanted to do that. And beyond the DNC wanting to do that, the most important part to this is they wanted to be hands-off. Because if they did this, it would look like an official capacity that the government of the Ukraine is answering something or doing something that's spurring on congressional hearings. It doesn't look like the DNC is involved in the process. This person, Chalupa, who is pushing this forward, they say, I love this. This is awesome. This is big time illegal politics. Chalupa later tried to arrange Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko to comment on Manafort's Russian ties to the United States visit in the 2016 campaign. Now, Chalupa, that's the ambassador. At the time of contacts in 2016, the ambassador knew Chalupa primarily as a Ukrainian-American activist and learned only later of her ties to the DNC. She was paid for her role in the DNC. The DNC says, no. We had nothing to do with that at all. We had nothing to do with it. She was working purely in her own capacity. Nothing to do with us. Our hands were off of this process. This is amazing. Let's keep going because it gets more interesting. All ideas floated by Chalupa were related to approaching members of Congress with the purpose of initiating hearings on Paul Manafort or letting an investigative journalist ask Poroshenko a question about Manafort during a public talk in Washington, the ambassador explained. Now, the ambassador continuously said, this person who admits to this, says, look, even though she was trying to do that, we never acquiesced to this. We never gave in to this. We refused everything. We refused it all because we said this was illegal. We had nothing to do with this. We had nothing to do with this. Now, the reason why they may be admitting to this is because someone gets popped in Ukraine for interfering in the United States elections. Meaning the Ukrainian court, right here. And I remember when this took place. The Ukrainian court ruled that the country's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, closely aligned with the United States Embassy in Kiev and Parliament named Serhiy Lutsenko, wrongly interfered with the 2016 election by releasing documents related to Manafort. The exact thing that the person who was working with the DNC was trying to get them to do. Oh, isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Now, the DNC says we have nothing to do with that. We have nothing to do with that. Federal Elections Commission showed that Chalupa's firm, Chalupa and Associates, was paid $71,918 by the DNC during the 2016 election cycle. I wonder why. Isn't that amazing? Now, they're saying that, look, the embassy says nothing happened. We didn't give them any information. We didn't give them anything at all. That information just so happened to be released by Manafort. All right, so here's the problem with Chalupa's statement, and you can understand why. I mean, with Chalupa's statement, the ambassador's statement, and you can understand why. Because if the ambassador owns up to the fact that they work with the United States, work with elements of the Democratic Party and the DNC to release information to hurt Donald Trump in the 2016 campaign, that is massive. Whatever you want to think of this Trump-Russia stuff, even if you believe Trump was working with the Russian government, this is 1,000 times worse. Because this is one of the political parties in office, in the capacities of the United States government, supposedly to protect the Constitution of the United States government, and that supposedly goes beyond this notion of party politics, using their capacity of government itself to interfere with the United States elections with the help of another government. And using the other government in a way to try to keep their hands off of it. It's kind of like the way that the United States uses private corporations. In order to evade the Freedom of Information Act, you put the information into a private corporation. The Freedom of Information Act can't step into a private corporation, so you can conceal what the government is doing. In this case, one of the political parties was doing something similar, using a foreign government to interfere into American politics. God, that's amazing. That's amazing. Now, here's the problem with the statement. Chalupa says nothing went through. We said that's illegal and we didn't do anything about it. The problem is the person who worked under her, who was commissioned with the responsibility of giving this information over, says a different story. So right here. I wrote last month that Obama White House invited Ukrainian law enforcement officials to a meeting in January 2016 as Trump rose in the polls on his improbable path to presidency. That meeting led to United States requests to the Ukrainians to help investigate Manafort, setting in motion a series of events that led to the Ukrainians leaking documents about Manafort in May 2016. If the Obama administration got involved in the election of 2016, that is massive. Now, let's keep going with this. Alexandria Tichenko, former political officer who worked under Chalupa, the woman who's the ambassador, who's finally owning up to the fact that there was a DNC operative working at the Ukrainian embassy. That person. So, Alexandria Tichenko, former political officer who worked under Chalupa, from December 2015 to 2016, told me he was instructed by the ambassador and their top deputy to meet with Chalupa in March 2016 and to gather whatever dirt Ukraine had on the government ties or files about Trump and Manafort. Tichenko said that he was told by the ambassadors to arrange the meeting where both Chalupa and ambassador's top deputy identified Chalupa as someone working for the DNC and trying to get Clinton elected. Now, this goes further because Tichenko makes the point that when he gets back to Ukraine, he finds that there were other people looking for information for dirt on Manafort and Trump and Russia. And he kind of assumed that all of these people were working at the behest of the DNC. Now, understand that Obama was in office at the time. And in collecting this information, I mean, granted, this is massively illegal right off the top. And these files on it. All right, so this information has to be released on Manafort. Again, just to be very clear. Ukrainian embassy comes forward. Let's start here. A Ukrainian official is popped for releasing information that interfered with the U.S. election. Essentially, that what took place in Ukraine. The Ukrainian embassy owns up to the fact that a DNC operative had been working at the embassy trying to get dirt on Manafort, and not just trying to get dirt on Manafort, trying to get the president of the Ukraine, a submissive president of the Ukraine, to release, to have conversations about Manafort's ties and Manafort's work in the Ukraine, particularly in coordination with Russia. Chalupa, the person who's responsible for this, or who's ambassador, who's admitting to this, says nothing was given. Now, the person who was working under her says not only was nothing not given, meaning he was instructed to get information on Trump, Manafort, and his ties to the Russian government. Meaning, get dirt on Manafort. That's what we want. We want dirt on Manafort in order to hurt Trump. We want congressional hearings on Manafort, again, in order to hurt Trump. All of this was to intercede itself into the election without the Democratic Party having their hands on the fact that all of this was taking place. I find this to be amazing. I mean, especially when we're talking about the Trump and Russia stuff, and we're asking these questions on how on earth did a dossier that was a political hit instrument get put into our intelligence services to where they start spying on the Trump campaign? Are these not fascinating questions? Now, Chalupa or Chalupa says we didn't do anything. We wouldn't do that. That's illegal. We pushed back those requests. But why am I disbelieving of that? So take a look at this. This is Joe Biden talking at a foreign affairs council of foreign relations. And what Joe Biden, in one of Joe Biden's gaffable ways, he's making this point that one of the prosecutors in the Ukraine, the Obama administration, Joe Biden didn't particularly like. And Joe Biden talks about how he threatens the government of the Ukraine, the president of the Ukraine, to fire the guy. Understand what we're saying? Joe Biden is saying that he threatens the prosecutor, or he threatens the president of another country to fire the prosecutor that they didn't particularly like, the man named Shokin. That's way beyond the pale. Now, what Joe Biden leaves out here is that the prosecutor was investigating a firm that Joe Biden's son was in. And in that corruption scandal investigation, that prosecutor was going to call all of these people to give depositions, including Joe Biden's son. Now, Joe Biden makes it sound like he fired the guy over the course of 6 hours. They were holding money over their heads. The Ukrainian government, like I said, was a new government. The government broke apart from the other country in this kind of revolution that the U.S. pushed forward. And these guys were a fledgling country. They were a submissive country. They were barely a country at all. And what we find is Joe Biden was right. They did need money. And Joe Biden, where is it? Right here. They needed money. Joe Biden threatened him. What Joe Biden didn't say at the Foreign Relations is that his son was working at the company that they were threatening. I'm just saying, that's a problem. My point is this. If Joe Biden was willing to threaten these guys, and let's say it's not directly related to his son, even though that looks massively bad. And it also looks massively bad that the United States, a country who says they believe in democracy, goes into another country and say you need to fire the prosecutor in your own country. That also looks extremely bad. But it shows something. Right here. In his own words, with the video cameras rolling, Biden described how he threatened Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko in March 2016 that the Obama administration will pull $1 billion in U.S. loan guarantees, sending the former Soviet Republic towards insolvency if it didn't immediately fire prosecutor Viktor Shokin. Now, if they were willing to push these guys to fire the prosecutor because for whatever reason, maybe the prosecutor wasn't doing what they wanted to do. Maybe the prosecutor didn't go after certain people that they wanted to go after. Whatever the reason. Are you telling me that with all the incentive in the world for these guys to push, for them to do some kind of investigation into Manafort, or for them to leak documents or information from Manafort, are you telling me that with the presidency on the line, with Trump not falling in the polls, with his Secretary of State running for office, and just so happens that these guys are entirely dependent on getting loans from the United States. Are you telling me that there is no incentive in the least for the Obama administration, in the same way it pushed to get rid of that prosecutor, and by the way, they did get rid of that prosecutor, for them to also release information on Manafort? The Ukrainian embassy is coming forward just enough, meaning for whatever reason, there's enough pressure on them where they feel they have to give some level of a story on this. Now, my argument is this. If they believe for the last 3 years, like the Sam Cedar argument, well, I mean, there was enough evidence, blah, 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 when you have done an investigation. All right, fair enough. If you believe that there was enough information that was out in the public that demanded, that warranted an investigation into Donald Trump, how the hell can you not look at this and say the same? Meaning, this looks extremely bad. We have Joe Biden saying that he threatened the prosecutor with loans, meaning the United States was holding $1 billion in loans that these guys needed, and these guys were willing to fire somebody in their country, a prosecutor in their country who was there, elected office, get rid of the guy in order to make sure they get those loans. It's a submissive government. The Obama administration, or let's say the Democratic Party in this case, have an operative inside the Ukrainian embassy that is pushing for dirt on Manafort. Pushing. And not just pushing for dirt on Manafort, also trying to get the president of the country to release information or to say something that would get Congress to bring up these, meaning talking to Congress and talking to the president to try to get him to say something, to bring up information that would get information or all eyes on Manafort, particularly a congressional investigation. And just so happens that the Ukrainian government ends up releasing information on Manafort, exactly what the DNC and the Democratic Party want. And that just so happens after a meeting between the Obama administration and Poroshenko. Now, even if you want to say, yeah, that looks bad, but there's nothing to see here, folks. How can you say that looks bad and there's nothing to see here, folks, with everything on the line? meaning there's a presidential election on the line. Hillary Clinton is not rising in the polls, even though everybody thinks Hillary Clinton is going to win. They don't necessarily know that. And you, in the Democratic Party, are in office, and you have the potential to nudge. Hands off, nudge. Maybe you guys need to release information about Manafort. We know that's exactly what they wanted to take place. And you're telling me that the Obama administration was going to be completely hands off of this process. And we already know that they had no issue pushing this government around, even to get rid of governmental offices or get people out of governmental offices. An investigation needs to take place in this. And not just into this, also into how the Trump-Russia thing started in the first place. This looks bad. This is a massive scandal. I'm sorry. If it finds that any way that the Obama administration pushed that government to release information on Manafort in order to influence the 2016 election, that is a massive scandal. It is also problematic that that is exactly what the DNC was trying to do. The Ukrainian embassy even comes out to say that is exactly what the DNC was trying to do. And just so happened, that is exactly what took place. There was collusion. There was collusion. I'm inclined to believe it was not Trump and Russia. Just saying. Just saying. And that doesn't even get into the Biden son thing. I mean, the issue with Biden's son by itself is a video by itself. We're talking about Joe Biden bragging about getting a prosecutor fired because they didn't necessarily like the prosecutor. No, for whatever reason, they didn't like the prosecutor. They it's political reasoning to some degree. But that prosecutor, what Joe Biden failed to admit at that summit, was that the prosecutor was investigating a good company and that Joe Biden's son worked. And that Joe Biden's son was going to be one of the people that would have had to give depositions. Just saying, man, just saying. Just saying. You're talking about politics. And what people would do.